So I wanted to follow up with Dr. Beckmann's video introducing you to Illustrator with a short video about why I love Illustrator and then some useful tricks that I've learned for working in Illustrator. So what I really like about Illustrator is that it really mimics the artwork that I do in real life. So I do paper cutting with multiple layers, and Illustrator really mimics that to a large extent. So it feels really natural for me to use this because I've already been thinking about translating things into blocks of color rather than a lot of shading and more like photorealistic work. So when I started using Illustrator, it was like kind of finding a great place to transform my physical artwork into digital. And since then, I've found a lot of other really great uses for it. One of the things that I really love about Illustrator is that everything is editable. So here are some preliminary ideas for these diagrams that I want to make about dragonfly larva, as usual, I guess. And I just started with one diagram that I made, and then I was able to convert this shape into these other shapes to kind of show these changes in the larva as they do these different processes really simply and just by editing points. So it's really easy to pick points and kind of move them around and change the shape of something. And so that's like great when in Photoshop, you struggle to make a straight line and then erase it and go back and do it over again. In Illustrator, you don't have to delete things and redo them. You can just move them. And so in a way, like everything is editable, and also there's editable, and there's no mistakes that can't be unmade besides deleting things. You can really just copy something and change it, and really it's a lot easier for like a lot of things like diagrams in order to do that. Another thing that I really like about Illustrator is, unlike Photoshop, it's a vector-based image instead of a raster. So, before we had resolution requirements on how big your piece had to be, and if it was too small resolution-wise, then you would get pixelation. In Illustrator, you do not get pixelation. You can zoom in infinitely, and you're not going to get pixels because instead of being stored as pixels, all of these shapes are being stored as mathematics. And first of all, I think that's just really cool in principle. But second of all, it really makes it easier. If I decide that I want to zoom in on this, I don't like the way that I lay out my canvas or whatever, I can really easily make things smaller and larger. Another thing I really like is, as you can see here, I actually have multiple artboards. So an artboard is this tool right here, and it is the canvas basically that you're working on. So I can have lots of different ideas for what I want my canvas to look like on the same page. And also I don't have to worry about like things disappearing. So if I imported a picture into Photoshop or import an object, it's always going to be present and visible on the canvas instead of like disappearing somewhere. So like while I'm working, if I want to move elements of my piece around, then I can kind of easily pull them off my artboard and store them to the side or whatever, like in case I want to use them again. So I found that really, really useful in comparison to Photoshop, where everything disappears if you pull it off the canvas. Other really useful things about Illustrator are how editable editable palettes and colors are. So there is this wheel up here. If you select something or a lot of things, hit recolor artwork. So you can actually go through and pick everything of one color and decide, oh, I want that to be actually a different color. And it's just super, super easy like that. And then there's also tools like this color theme tool, where you can either look at palettes other people have created and take all of your work from those palettes, or you can actually create your own. So you can load a color that you've already been using and take a look at different ways of kind of comparing that color. So you can use like monochromatic or complementary or triad color choices. And so it gives you a really easy way to kind of develop really good color themes for your piece. So I found that really, really useful. And then another thing that I find super useful is that it's really easy to align objects. So one of the things that Illustrator is really great for is graphic design. And I often edit my graphs in Illustrator because of that. So I can, if I have these elements here in my graphs, and I wanted them all to line up, it's super easy. So I can just pick them all and then pick the object I want them to line up with, and then just choose one of these align buttons here, and things will line up neatly. Illustrator is really the program you should be using rather than Photoshop. InDesign is maybe better for doing graphic design because it's just really made for it in a way that Photoshop isn't. And I'm going to make a tutorial later about editing graphs in Illustrator. It's, I think, really a useful way to get your graphs to be really nice and publishable. So when you're starting out with Illustrator, I think a mistake that I definitely made and a lot of people make is you want to make an object. So let's say I want to make a eye. And then you just go and you're like, oh, I'm going to outline this eye with this annoying tool here. And you like try to put in all the points to outline the eye. And then once you've laid down your path, you can select your, whatever this is called, direct selection tool, and highlight all your things. And then you can turn them into curves. And then adjust your curves and everything. But there's also a curve tool, which will kind of do this a lot more easily. And like one of the things you can notice about this is I can do the same thing. I can make this object here with many fewer points. So I think a big mistake that people do going out very frequently is using too many points, because the more points you have, the more points you have to edit. Whereas you can create very similar shapes that are actually a lot more smooth and even. Really, just by putting many fewer points on and then editing it. So I think it's really important when you're beginning to kind of err on the fewest points possible. So you can see how much easier it is to do that than to adjust all these little points here. And that was definitely a learning curve for me. So once you have your object, you have kind of two big choices to make with it, and then a lot of small choices, I guess. So there is 2 points to an object. There's the stroke and the fill. And you can make either of those invisible. where did my object go? And you can also make either of those present and edit. And then there are other things. There's the gradient and mesh tool, which I'm not going to get into because it's scary. And then the other thing that's really important about shapes is groups and layers. And I'll show you this with a dragonfly here. Like Photoshop, Illustrator has layers, but it also has groups, and groups are like layers within layers, and you can kind of get layers within layers infinitely. So here, you can see how many different layers I've got going on in just this one figure here. So if, when you want to know like what you have selected, where it is in the layers, you go to your layers panel and it will actually have a little button next to it. And each of the layers is a different color, and you can change the colors and the names of the layers like this. I like to choose colors that are like a big contrast to what I'm doing, so it's easier to see the outlines of the shapes. And then when you click out, so when I click on this, I can't edit any of the elements of it. I have to double click, and then it will actually go into that group, and it will kind of mute the colors of the other groups. So here I am in this group, and I can kind of select these different like subgroups within this group, but and I can resize them or delete them or change their properties. And I can kind of do that all at once, which is super useful. You know, I want my entire dragonfly to have the same outline width or whatever. Yeah. Then if I want to manipulate a path within it, I have to, again, click on it twice. And you can see here at the top, this is kind of the layer within the layer within the layer structure that's happening. And this can get really frustrating if you're not sure what layer you're in, or you weren't trying to get into a layer, or if like I want to edit this one and that one at the same time. There's no real good way to do that. You have to be into the same subgroup if I want to be able to manipulate two independent objects at the same time. So like, you know, if I want to change all of these circles here, I'm going to have a bad time doing that. To make a group, you see I wanted to make a group out of kind of these three objects here, which I can't, I guess, because they're already in a group. I would select them, oh, damn it. I would select them and hit group. And then, good. And then that puts them all together. And another way to do that, to select things, to put them into group, is to choose them here. So clicking on these boxes will actually select the elements. There they are down there, you can see. You have to hold shift while you do this, and you can't like go and like go from here and shift and select it down there, which is really annoying in my opinion. And then you can go to this properties tab and hit group, and that will make all of those elements into the same group. And now you can see they all move together. And in order to edit them independently, I have to select on them like that. And this is going to be super useful when doing graphs. So for example, in my graph here, I want all these bars to remain in the same relationship to each other and to this number axis. So I might want to group all these shapes together so that I can never change like how the bars are related to each other or the numbers. And so that's one of the really useful purposes of it. And then also like, I want to keep all of these elements together, um, no matter what happens. And so grouping is a good way to do that. Um, so I think like, um, especially when you're importing things into Illustrator, like graphs in order to edit them, it can get really frustrating if you're not really sure like what's happening with groups and layers. So that's the really important thing to get kind of a handle on. And I think that Illustrator can be really, really frustrating when you're just beginning. Um, but like once you kind of get a sense for how it works, you can create some really amazing things in it.